but companies in general, Indian companies, multinational companies, are using the power of the conversation age to communicate with their customers successfully. In a conversation economy, this is peer-to-peer, which is two people talking to each other, fueled by communities, which I spoke of, and online data, information. And this drives brand perceptions and purchase decisions. Now, very simple map, but it just shows you how a product gets sold or bought in today's world versus how it used to be 5 years ago or 10 years ago, which was the more push approach that I was talking about earlier. And in today's economy, in today's conversation age, it's moved very clearly. We need to understand these words. Conversation, I've spoken about. Communities, we've spoken about. Content, value, engagement, we've spoken about. But the last one is always on. Always on is something that one cannot forget. It's 24/7, through the night, through the day. People are watching, people are talking, people are chattering. And that's the most important part, because it's an always-on economy. The conversation economy is an always-on economy. The next section will give you some examples of how the first two parts about bringing conversations and then engaging people in an always-on economy can come to life. So we'll share some of this with you. So we looked at some research, and we saw what marketeers thought. And actually, if you look at this, it shows you that very few people actually understand their customers. Or on the other hand, very few customers actually understand the company whose products they buy. And this number is pathetic. It just shows you that only 1% of all organizations are actually taking the information from a customer and putting it back and actually doing something. So there's a company called Dell. I'm sure you've heard of it. So Dell is one such company that comes in that 1%. Because what Dell did is, when their customers didn't like Dell and they complained, Dell said, okay, you don't like our products, why don't you come up with your products yourself? So they allowed customers to go online and come up with ideas. And I'll talk about that a little later in the presentation. I'll give you a Dell example. But they came up with this concept where you could go online, you could create a product, or you could give an idea for a product, and they would make that product and sell it. And then they said, this product is your idea, so it's not my idea. I'm not forcing you to buy a laptop, which I have made. I'm making a laptop for you which you like. So if all the customers said, we don't like black laptops, we like red laptops, they said, okay, we'll make red laptops for you. And suddenly Dell has gone from a company which was on the verge of shutting down to one of the biggest IT companies in 10 years, just because they understood this part. They understood conversations, they understood engagement, they understood real time, they understood always on, they understood everything. And we'll talk about a few examples going forward. Consumers are very different. Consumers today are aware, they're educated, they're not dumb. Most people think they still are. Consumers today are able to filter information. Consumers today are avoiding traditional advertising because they find that traditional advertising is something that's paid for, and most people today understand the difference between paid media and earned media. So earned media is what is not pushed but is word of mouth, and paid media is advertising, as we all know. And the consumers today desire interaction. They desire to share things. They desire to socialize. They want authentic connections. They want multi-digital experiences. They want to be able to communicate with the brand. They don't want to just go and buy a brand. They want to be able to communicate with the brand. That's different from the way it used to be. And most importantly, I spoke about trust right at the beginning, and the trust is wearing off, but that trustworthy connection between a product and a customer is very, very important. And the customer today is no longer a customer where he's in just one axis. You can look at a customer and say, okay, he's just the guy who comes and buys my things. A customer today is a user. It's very different from how a customer would have been 20 years ago. Example, a lot of times people in the old days would just go and buy something because somebody would ask them to buy it. They were not actually using the product themselves. Today you will rarely find someone buying a product unless that person uses the product himself. Even brand ambassadors, you have all these brand ambassadors endorsing brands. They genuinely, some of them, not all of them, a lot of them just get paid to do it, but some of them genuinely like the product. So if someone genuinely likes a Samsung product, that person will be a more natural ambassador for the product than just seeing somebody in an ad talking about it. Because that person is then constantly in a conversation environment. A customer is no longer somebody who's just buying a product. A consumer is part of a community. A consumer is a participant. A consumer is a producer. And a consumer is a consumer. So in the old days, it was just the guy on the left with a dollar sign. And now you have consumers of all kinds buying your products. And this is what the digital age is all about. The digital age is about being able to consult with a client, come up with the right strategy, have a conversation with the client and with the consumer. Digital publishing, which is using social media tools. I showed you some examples earlier. And measuring this. So we'll talk about some case studies. But before that, some interesting quotes. I was talking about attention spans. So the BBC, which is one of the most reputed news organizations in the world, and I don't think anyone disagrees, has, in their research, they say that web browsing is actually so addictive that your attention span is like a goldfish, which is basically means nothing, right? So it just means that the world is becoming so narrow that people don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the attention span to listen to some guy talking to them because there's just so much happening all around them. And so I'm going to talk about a few lessons from this, and then at the end I'll get into some case studies. But lessons in the conversation economy for people who are in the marketing business, people who are in the communications business. First and foremost, modifying marketing strategies by listening and finding out what a customer really wants. Now, listening is a very, very important thing. So what we try and do for clients is to listen to what consumers are saying, like the Dell example, and take those learnings back and then come up with a product or something which the customer actually wants, and not sell them something which you want to sell them because you find that it looks good to you, but it may not look good to your customer. That's the first thing. The second thing is make genuine contribution to conversation. So what this means is when a conversation is going on about something, don't just show up there with your brand and say, I'm here, my brand is nice. Someone will just push it aside and they won't, because it's not like watching an ad on TV. Online, you don't need to worry. You don't have to watch any crap that somebody gives you. So you have a choice as a consumer. Find leaders of conversation. So there are opinion leaders online. There are bloggers. There are people who are writing about subjects. We need to find them and be able to seed the idea about our product or brand through these people. Market to social networks by facilitating and tapping into conversations around brands, which is some of what I said before, which is talk to people and not try and find ways of talking down to them, but talking to them. And build relationships of trust. I think all communities have something in common. There are people who like reading, there are people who like music, there are people who like movies. So you need to find the people with similar likes and then attract their attention and work with them. Because if you talk to the wrong guy who doesn't like that subject matter, then you're just wasting your time with your brand. So conversations done via social media. Very clearly, the objective here is to look at communication from a upside down approach. So everything used to start with advertising. Today we are saying everything should start with social media. Then advertising, PR, direct marketing, everything else happens later. So the world needs to look at the marketing piece and say, does it start with advertising or does it start with PR or does it start with events? No, it starts with social. Create an environment where company and customers discuss issues real time. So what used to happen in the past? You're a shareholder of a company, you want to ask a question, you would write a letter. The letter would go to somebody in the company, then to the company secretary, then the guy would get some time when he felt like, and normally you would take 2 months to get a letter back. And if any of you have been shareholders with organizations 10 or 15 years ago, you would understand what I mean. So you would take 6 weeks to get a letter back from the company. Now you try doing that, you're not going to have a shareholder left. Okay? So if you're an organization and you want to have people investing in you, or if you're a product company and you want to buy, you want to have someone buy something from you, you've got to be instant, real time. You've got to be able to respond to the guy. If he has a question, you have to respond to him instantly. You can't say I'll get back to you when I feel like. That approach doesn't work. Understand the customers are the decision makers. Like Lafley said from P&G, the customers are the decision makers. The guys who sell the products are not the decision makers anymore. 10 years ago, if I made a car, I would decide what I wanted to put in the car. Today, it's the customer who decides what he wants in the car. And if, as a marketeer, I don't understand that, then I'm not going to be successful. Listen, very important. Do not make any decisions about your product, service, anything, unless you listen to the conversations that are going on. Join in to shape the conversation. So this is what Coca-Cola does well. So what happened with Coke is they tried this approach of getting people to talk on various forums, and nobody was bothered. And then suddenly there was an independent community of people who got together and started talking about Coke. And this community became huge, and there were like millions of people on it. So then Coke said, why are we wasting our time trying to communicate with these guys? Let's become part of their conversation. So Coke went to them and said, listen, we are on your side. We don't want to create our own community. We'll become part of your community. So they sort of became a quasi-Coke community, and it's very successful even today. So what Coke did was the right thing, because they didn't try and hijack that community. They didn't try and tell them, listen, you guys shut up because you guys don't own Coke. I own the Coke brand. So that could have been easily done. And some people have made mistakes like that. Companies have gone and told people that, listen, who are you to be talking about my product? It's my product. But that approach doesn't work anymore, because you have to become a part of the conversation. Add value to the conversations. Again, Coke example. And dare to let the brand create conversation for itself. And some people will say bad things. It's cool. So what? You have to learn to listen to it. Just because you make a product, everyone's not going to say it's the best product on the planet. So if there are 100,000 conversations and 10 people don't like your product, it's good to know, because you should take that feedback, that criticism, and learn from it, and not look at it as a negative thing. And the things that matter the most are integrity, honesty, transparency, and interaction. And I'm not saying this today because I just learned this morning that these are the 4 most important values, but anyone should know that these are the 4 most important values. If we didn't have these values, there wouldn't be any ethical people on this planet. There won't be any ethical products on this planet. So it's a very basic tenet to understand the things that matter the most. Whether you're in an online conversation or in a conversation economy, you have to follow the same rules. Rules don't change. It's not that because we have an internet economy now, we'll take shortcuts, we'll try and do things differently. No, still do the same things in the right way, the way it's always done. And make small, consistent contributions over time, which means as a brand, as a marketeer, as a company, whatever you may be, talk to your customers